Lieutenant Nova Jensen stood at attention before the United Earth Defense Council, her ceremonial uniform pressed to perfection, hiding the network of scars earned from years of combat training. The council chamber's massive windows revealed Earth's orbital defense stations floating against the backdrop of stars, humanity's first line of defense against the unexpected arrival of the Dragon Dominion's fleet 3 days ago. Lieutenant Jensen, Admiral Zhou's voice echoed through the chamber, "You understand why you've been summoned?" Nova's jaw tightened. Everyone knew about the diplomatic disaster that had unfolded during first contact. What should have been a peaceful meeting had spiraled into a challenge of combat after Ambassador Richards had accidentally insulted the Dragon Dominion's honor by performing what humans considered a respectful bow, a gesture that, among dragons, signified surrender and submission to execution. "Yes, Admiral. The Dragon Dominion demands satisfaction through ritual combat." Admiral Zhou nodded, his weathered face grave. "What you might not know is that they've rejected our offer of our most decorated soldiers. They want you specifically." Nova's composure cracked for a moment. "Me, sir?" A hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber, showing footage from Nova's last martial arts tournament. In it, she moved with impossible speed, taking down opponents twice her size with a combination of traditional martial arts and modern combat techniques she developed herself. Their observers were present at the Pan-Solar tournament last month, Counselor Washington explained, her dark eyes fixed on Nova. "They believe your fighting style most closely matches their ancient warriors. They see you as worthy." Nova processed this information, understanding its implications. The dragons hadn't chosen her for her rank or her medals. They'd chosen her because they wanted to prove their superiority over humanity's best fighter. "The terms are simple," Admiral Zhou continued. "You will face their champions in combat. If you win, the Dragon Dominion will recognize humanity as equals and establish diplomatic relations. If you lose, they glass our major cities and reduce humanity to a vassal species," Nova finished, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. "Correct." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "This isn't fair to you, Lieutenant. One person shouldn't have to bear the responsibility for humanity's future. If you decline dash." "I accept," Nova interrupted, her voice firm. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Admiral Zhou leaned forward. "Lieutenant, please understand what you're agreeing to. The dragons aren't just physically superior, they've been breeding for combat for millennia. Their warriors train from the moment they can walk. This isn't like any fight you've faced before." Nova met his gaze. "With respect, sir, they chose me because they think they know how humans fight. They're wrong. We don't fight like them, for glory or dominance. We fight to survive, to protect. And that makes us more dangerous than they can imagine." The chamber fell silent. Finally, Counselor Washington spoke. "Very well, Lieutenant Jensen. You have 3 weeks to prepare. We'll provide whatever resources you need." As Nova turned to leave, Admiral Zhou called out one last time. "Lieutenant? Why did you accept so quickly?" Nova paused at the chamber doors, remembering her childhood in the asteroid mining colonies, watching her parents work themselves to exhaustion to give her a better future. Remembering every human who'd ever been told they weren't good enough, strong enough, worthy enough. "Because sir," she said without turning around, "someone has to show them that humanity doesn't bow to anyone, not even dragons." The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving Nova alone with the weight of her decision. She had 3 weeks to prepare for a fight that would determine humanity's future. 3 weeks to figure out how to defeat creatures that had evolved specifically for combat. But as she walked through the station's corridors, Nova smiled. The dragons had made one critical mistake: they'd chosen their opponent based on how she fought in tournaments, with rules and restrictions. They had no idea what humans were capable of when those rules no longer applied. It was time to show the Dragon Dominion why humanity had survived every extinction-level event their planet had thrown at them. And maybe, just maybe, teach them that underestimating humans was the last mistake any species should make. The holographic dragon lunged at Nova, its massive jaws snapping shut where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. She rolled, using the momentum to spring back to her feet, only to find another hologram's tail whipping toward her midsection. This time, she didn't dodge. Instead, she stepped into the attack, her body moving on pure instinct, hands finding the precise point where the tail's momentum could be redirected. Simulation terminated, announced the AI's calm voice. The training room's holograms flickered and vanished, leaving Nova alone in the stark white space, breathing hard. "Your timing is improving," came a gravelly voice from the observation deck. Nova looked up to see Master Chen, her old martial arts instructor, watching with his usual unreadable expression. He'd come out of retirement specifically to help her prepare for the upcoming challenge. "It's not enough," Nova said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Their reaction speed is still faster than mine." "Then stop trying to match their speed." Master Chen made his way down to the training floor, his cybernetic leg whirring softly. "You're thinking like a human trying to fight like a dragon. Think like a human fighting like a human." Before Nova could respond, the training room's door slid open. Captain Marcus Reed, her military liaison, entered with a tablet in hand and an expression that suggested complicated news. "Lieutenant Jensen," he said, "we've received a unique request from the Dragon Dominion." Nova tensed. "What kind of request?" "They want you to train with them." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Master Chen's perpetual calm showed a crack of surprise. "It's unprecedented," Marcus continued. "They've never invited any other species to their training grounds. The Council thinks it might be a trap, a way to study your techniques before the challenge." "Or," Master Chen interjected, "they're honoring their own traditions. Dragons believe in testing their opponents at full strength. They may actually want to help you prepare." Nova considered this, remembering the historical data she'd been studying. Dragon culture was built on a complex framework of honor and combat. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to win against an opponent at their peak. "I'll do it," she decided. Marcus frowned. "Lieutenant, the risk is necessary," Nova finished. "We need to understand them better. And they need to understand us." 2 days later, Nova stood in the docking bay of the Dragon Dominion's flagship, the Eternal Flame. The vessel was massive, its interior architecture a blend of ancient aesthetics and advanced technology. Everything was built to dragon scale, making Nova feel like she'd wandered into a world of giants. Her escort, a dragon warrior named Vexthor, regarded her with gleaming copper eyes. His scales shifted colors in the light, creating patterns that seemed to tell stories of ancient battles. "You are smaller than expected," he rumbled, his translator converting the complex series of growls and clicks into English. "You should see me when I'm angry," Nova replied, earning a sound that might have been a laugh. The training arena was unlike anything Nova had seen before. The floor seemed to be made of living metal, shifting and reforming based on thought alone. The walls reached up into darkness, lined with weapons that would have looked more at home in a museum of medieval torture devices than a modern combat facility. "Our youngest warriors train here," Vexthor explained, leading her to the center of the arena. "They learn to harness their fire, to understand the dance of combat." "And what will I learn?" Nova asked. Vexthor's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "That depends on whether you survive the first lesson." Without warning, the floor beneath Nova's feet erupted. She leaped, barely avoiding a pillar of flame that would have incinerated her. More pillars rose around her, creating a deadly maze of fire and metal. "Your species fears fire," Vexthor observed, watching her navigate the hazards. "Yet you built your civilization by mastering it. Interesting contradiction." Nova danced between the flames, her movements becoming more fluid as she learned the pattern. Humans are full of contradictions. It's what makes us dangerous. So we are learning, Vexthor agreed. You fight with precision, yet adapt with chaos. You show respect, yet refuse to submit. You are weak, yet persist beyond all reason. As Nova completed the fire maze, Vexthor's expression changed to something like approval. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, that is why the elders chose you. Not because you fight like us, but because you fight like no one else. Over the next 2 weeks, Nova trained with the dragons, learning their ways while carefully revealing only what she wanted them to see of human combat techniques. She learned that dragons didn't just fight with their bodies, they fought with their minds, their spirits, their very essence. But more importantly, she learned their weaknesses. Their pride that made them predictable. Their tradition that made them inflexible. Their strength that made them overconfident. And as the day of the challenge drew closer, Nova realized something that filled her with both hope and dread. The dragons hadn't invited her to train because they wanted to study her. They'd invited her because they wanted to understand what made humans different. What they didn't realize was that in trying to understand humanity, they had given Nova exactly what she needed, a way to beat them at their own game. In her quarters aboard the Eternal Flame, Nova reviewed the combat footage from her training sessions, her mind already formulating strategies that no dragon would expect. Because while they had been teaching her to fight like a dragon, she had been learning how to beat one. The grand arena of the Dragon Dominion hung in space like a massive golden ring, its ancient architecture defying the cold emptiness around it. Nova stood in the preparation chamber, her specialized combat suit gleaming under the ceremonial lights. The material, a breakthrough in human engineering, was designed to resist dragon fire while allowing maximum mobility. The House of Eternal Flame has chosen its champions, Captain Reed announced, checking his datapad. You'll be facing 3 of their elite warriors, including Vexthor. Nova's hand paused as she adjusted her gauntlet. Vexthor? He was my training partner. Exactly why they chose him, Master Chen said from his position near the wall. They believe he knows your techniques, your patterns. They think this gives them an advantage. Nova smiled slightly. Then they weren't paying attention during training. A low horn sounded through the chamber, its resonance making the metal walls vibrate. It was time. Nova took a deep breath, centering herself as she'd done countless times before competitions. But this was no tournament, this was a fight for humanity's future. The arena doors opened with a sound like ancient thunder. Nova walked out onto a platform that seemed to be made of living crystal, its surface shifting colors beneath her feet. The space above was open to the stars, protected by energy fields that contained the atmosphere while allowing spectators to view from ships positioned around the arena. Across the vast space, 3 dragons emerged from their entrance. Their scales caught the light of distant suns, creating a dazzling display of natural armor. Vexthor stood in the center, his copper eyes finding Nova immediately. To his right was a larger dragon with obsidian scales that seemed to absorb light. To his left, a smaller but more agile-looking dragon with scales that shimmered like mother-of-pearl. The voice of the Dominion, a massive dragon with scales of pure gold, spoke from his elevated position. The terms of combat have been set. The human champion will face our chosen warriors in succession. Victory requires submission or incapacitation. Death is. He paused, looking directly at Nova, discouraged. Nova took her position as the obsidian dragon stepped forward first. She recognized him from the training facility, Morbex, known for his overwhelming strength and endurance. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect between warriors. Your species has courage, he rumbled, his translator making the words sound like rolling thunder. It will be an honor to test its limits. The signal was given, and Morbex moved with stunning speed for his size. His tail swept low, trying to knock Nova off her feet while his claws came in high, a classic dragon combination designed to force an opponent to choose between two bad options. Nova chose neither. Instead of dodging or blocking, she ran straight at Morbex, moving into his guard before he could adjust his attack. Dragons were used to opponents trying to maintain distance, to stay away from their natural weapons. They weren't prepared for someone who eliminated that distance entirely. Nova's fist struck a point just below Morbex's throat, a nerve cluster she discovered during her training sessions. The dragon's eyes widened in shock as his left arm temporarily lost function. He tried to compensate by breathing fire, but Nova was already moving, using his own body as a shield against his flames. The fight continued, with Morbex growing increasingly frustrated as Nova refused to engage in the type of combat he was trained for. She didn't try to match his strength or speed. Instead, she turned his size against him, used his expectations against him, fought in ways that dragons had never considered. When Morbex finally fell, it wasn't from a mighty blow or a dramatic technique. It was from accumulated precision strikes to nerve clusters, from constant movement that forced him to expend energy inefficiently, from a fighting style that made all his training work against him. The arena was silent as Morbex signaled his submission. The pearl-scaled dragon stepped forward next, her movements more cautious now, having witnessed Nova's tactics. "I am Lyra," she announced, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. "You fight with wisdom rather than power. But wisdom alone cannot overcome natural law." What followed was a very different fight. Lyra was faster than Morbex, more technical in her approach. She used her fire not just as a weapon but as a tool, creating patterns of flame that forced Nova to move in predictable ways. Or at least, that was her intent. Nova had spent 2 weeks training with dragons, learning not just their techniques but their thinking. They approached combat like a force of nature, overwhelming, inevitable, bound by ancient laws and patterns. But humans had survived on Earth by learning to adapt, to change, to break patterns. When Lyra created a spiral of flame designed to force Nova to move outward, Nova instead rolled through a gap in the pattern that no dragon would have considered, their larger bodies making such a move impossible. The moment of surprise was all she needed. As Lyra joined Morbex in defeat, Nova finally faced Vexthor. Her former training partner stepped forward, his copper eyes holding something that might have been amusement. "You showed us only what you wanted us to see," he said, not a question but an observation. Nova nodded. "You offered to teach me to fight like a dragon. Instead, you taught me how dragons think. Then let us see what else you learned." The final bout began, and it was unlike anything the arena had ever witnessed. Vexthor knew Nova's techniques, but Nova knew his expectations. They moved in a deadly dance of fire and precision, each trying to outthink the other while their bodies carried out the physical chess match. But Nova had one final lesson to demonstrate, the most human lesson of all. When Vexthor committed to a powerful attack, Nova did something that went against every dragon combat principle. She let herself get hit. The blow sent her sliding across the crystal floor, but it also put her exactly where she needed to be. Before Vexthor could recover his balance, Nova struck. The combination was one she developed specifically for this moment, a series of strikes that used the dragon's own nerve clusters against them in a way their anatomy made it impossible to defend against. Vexthor fell, and in the silence that followed, Nova realized she wasn't just fighting for humanity's survival anymore. She was fighting to show the dragons that there was more than one way to be strong. The celebration aboard the human diplomatic vessel lasted exactly 3 minutes before the first transmission from the Dragon Dominion arrived. Nova, still in her combat suit and nursing several impressive bruises, watched the council members' faces shift from jubilation to concern as they read the message. "They want what?" Admiral Zhou's voice carried a dangerous edge. Counselor Washington cleared her throat. "The Dragon Dominion acknowledges Lieutenant Jensen's victory, but they've expanded their terms. They want her to become their combat instructor. The room erupted in confused discussion. Nova stayed silent, her mind racing. She'd expected retaliation after her victory. Wounded pride often led to escalation. But this was different. This was calculated. Captain Reed voiced what everyone was thinking. It's a trap. They want to study her techniques, find weaknesses. No, Nova said, drawing everyone's attention. They want to understand. She stepped forward, bringing up the holographic replay of her fights. Look at their combat style, it hasn't evolved in thousands of years. They've been the apex predators for so long they've stopped adapting. But today, they saw something they couldn't explain. A physically weaker species using completely foreign tactics to defeat their best warriors. And now they want to learn these tactics? Admiral Zhou scoffed. The same tactics we could use against them in the future? They want to learn how we think, Nova corrected. Because for the first time in their history, they're facing something their traditional methods can't overcome. Before anyone could respond, a second transmission arrived. This one was from Vexthor himself, marked as personal correspondence. The message was simple: the greatest wisdom often comes from those we once thought beneath us. Nova smiled slightly. They're not trying to trap us. They're trying to evolve. 2 days later, Nova found herself walking through the halls of the Dragon Dominion's most prestigious combat academy. The structure was built into an asteroid, its corridors large enough to accommodate dragons of all sizes. Young dragons stopped their training to watch her pass, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. High Elder Krax, his scales a deep burgundy that spoke of ancient lineage, led the tour. Our warriors have trained the same way for 50 generations, he explained, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions in his voice. We believe this made us strong. Your victory has shown us that strength can take many forms. They reached a massive training chamber where Vexthor waited with a group of dragon warriors, including Morbex and Lyra. The chamber's walls were lined with holographic projectors and adaptive terrain generators, technology that could recreate any combat scenario imaginable. Your first class awaits, Instructor Jensen, Krax said, using her new title with what might have been amusement. Nova surveyed the dragons before her. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to teach you to fight like humans. I'm here to teach you why humans fight the way we do. Morbex tilted his massive head. Is there a difference? Humans developed our combat techniques because we were never the strongest species on our planet, Nova explained. We couldn't rely on natural weapons or armor. We had to understand our opponents, adapt to them, find ways to turn their strengths into weaknesses. She activated the chamber's holographic system, creating a simulation of Earth's prehistoric predators. Every technique I used against you was born from thousands of years of humans facing creatures that could easily kill us. We survived not by being the strongest, but by being the most adaptable. Lyra's pearl scales shimmered as she moved forward. You speak of evolution through necessity. Exactly. Nova smiled. The question is, are you ready to evolve? What followed was unlike any training session in the Dominion's history. Nova taught them about human martial arts principles, not just the physical techniques, but the philosophy behind them. She showed them how humans turn disadvantages into advantages, how we studied our opponents to find patterns they didn't even know they had. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. The dragons started sharing their own insights, their own experiences. The training sessions became exchanges of knowledge rather than simple instruction. During one particularly intense session, Vexthor demonstrated a traditional dragon combat form. Our ancestors developed this to channel our fire breath most effectively, he explained. Nova studied the movement, then suggested a modification based on human biomechanics. The resulting technique was neither purely dragon nor purely human, it was something new. You're not just teaching us new ways to fight, Vexthor observed later. You're teaching us to question our assumptions. That's the most human trait of all, Nova replied. We never stop asking why things are the way they are, and if they could be different. But not everyone welcomed this exchange of knowledge. Nova began noticing tension among some of the older dragon warriors. Whispers in corridors, challenging looks, subtle signs of resistance to change. Then came the day when one of the elder dragons, his scales a deep crimson, interrupted a training session. You dishonor our traditions, he growled, translator off, but Nova had learned enough of their language to understand. Making us fight like prey instead of predators. The chamber fell silent. Nova stepped forward, keeping her voice calm but firm. Your traditions made you strong. But strength without growth becomes stagnation. The universe is changing. The question isn't whether you'll change with it, but whether you'll change on your own terms. The confrontation ended without violence, but Nova understood the message. She wasn't just teaching combat techniques anymore, she was challenging thousands of years of dragon culture. And some would resist that change with everything they had. The warning came at midnight ship's time. Nova was reviewing training footage when Vexthor burst into her quarters, his copper scales dulled with urgency. The traditionalists, he said without preamble. They're making their move. Nova was already moving, grabbing her combat suit. How bad? They've taken control of the Academy's defense systems. High Elder Krax is being held in the ancient dueling chamber. They're demanding an end to the human-dragon training program and... He hesitated. And? Your execution. They claim you've corrupted our ways. Nova checked her suit's systems while accessing the Academy's layout on her datapad. How many? 20 warriors, led by Elder Razorfang. They're blocking all communications with both the Dominion fleet and your people. Nova nodded, her mind already formulating strategies. They chose their timing well. Most of the progressive dragons are at the outer training grounds. This isn't your fight, Vexthor said suddenly. You could reach your ship, return to Earth. The treaty dash would be worthless, Nova finished. This isn't just about me anymore. If the traditionalists win, they'll use this as proof that humans and dragons can't coexist. Everything we've built will be destroyed. They moved through the Academy's corridors, now eerily empty. Nova had spent weeks memorizing every path, every junction, every potential tactical advantage. She'd known something like this might happen, change never came without resistance. They reached a maintenance shaft that led to the dueling chamber's upper level. Nova turned to Vexthor. I need you to gather any allies you can trust. When you hear the signal, strike from the outer perimeter. What signal? Nova smiled grimly. Trust me, you'll know it. The ancient dueling chamber was a massive cavern carved directly into the asteroid's heart. Ceremonial flames burned in eternal braziers, casting dramatic shadows across the gathered dragons. High Elder Krax was restrained by energy bonds, his burgundy scales marred by signs of struggle. Elder Razorfang, his black scales bearing the red markings of the most conservative warrior caste, stood at the chamber's center. His massive form radiated contempt as he addressed his followers. For millennia, the Dragon Dominion has stood as the pinnacle of warrior culture, his voice boomed. Now we let a human teach us to fight like prey, to abandon our natural strengths. This poison must be purged. Nova chose that moment to step out onto one of the upper ledges. Interesting speech, she called down. Wrong, but interesting. The chamber erupted in chaos as dragons moved to surround her position. Razorfang's eyes narrowed. The human comes to her own execution. How appropriate. Actually, Nova said, her voice carrying clearly through the space, I came to teach one final lesson. She jumped.